Hi there, Adam Gower here at the Real Estate Crowdfunding Show, syndication in the digital age at gowercrowd.com. And I am looking at my guest's website, Building Engines. And it's not often that you see these kinds of numbers. 25,000 buildings and over 2.4 billion square feet managed by their systems. That is one ginormous platform. Of course, all you're going to hear about today from my amazing guest, Building Engine's Chief Marketing Officer, Lou Jordano, is how he goes about marketing his company. To discover what their services are, though Lou gallantly pitches them throughout the podcast as any good CMO would and should do, you'll have to go to the show notes page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com, where there's a link to their website and to more information about Lou at the bottom of the page. Imagine that though, working for a company whose systems run over 2.4 billion square feet of commercial real estate and what it must take to be an effective marketer to that scale of industry presence. Well, remarkably, it's not a lot different from what you can do to operate your own digital marketing system. And to find out exactly how to do that by watching a detailed walkthrough of the systems that we here at Gower Crowd build for our private clients, just go to the podcast page at gowercrowd.com where there's a link to the whiteboard workshop that I put together for you that takes you through the whole thing. So check this out. You're going to learn from my guest Lou today about what works well on social media so you can implement the same techniques, what is the hardest part of marketing to a sophisticated, knowledgeable audience just like you do when you're raising money from accredited investors, why LinkedIn is a great place to do your marketing and how to do it, and a whole lot more. And remember, the whiteboard workshop on the podcast page at gowercrowd.com will give you a deep look into how to build a world-class digital content marketing system so you can raise more money for your deals. So be sure to sign up for that totally free training. So here we go. My great pleasure to bring you the man whose company oversees more square footage of any company I've ever come across before, Lou Jordano, Chief Marketing Officer at Building Engines. Lou, thank you so much for being on my podcast today. It's a real pleasure to meet you.
Same here, Adam. It's great to be here. Thank you so much for having me.
Sure. Now, I want to know everything about buildingengines.com, but specifically, I think you and I have been put together to talk about your marketing and how you get your business out to the commercial real estate industry. And the one thing that I know that you do is that you actually have an extremely proactive marketing company, right? Or PR anyway, at V2Com. So that puts you definitely in amongst the leaders of those trying to get out.
We are not fooling around here, Adam. We're only for the top shelf here.
Exactly, from the 13th floor of wherever you are, exactly.
That's right.
So, Lou, please tell me something about, let's start with the main challenges that you have, that you've overcome when marketing Building Engines to the commercial real estate industry.
Sure, I'm happy to do that. And so, just for your listeners, in case they're not aware, Building Engines is the modern building operations platform for commercial real estate. So we think about, class A and B office, for example, retail, industrial, flex space, those kinds of things. We help owners and operators deliver an exceptional tenant experience in addition to maximizing profitability and efficiency. So that's sort of the space that we play in and what we do. We have over 25,000 buildings, 750 customers, and we currently have over 2.5 billion square feet under management. So we've been doing this for quite some time at scale, and so it's a great market, and we love our customers, and it's a good spot for us. So I'm happy to dig in with you on the market.
So I'm going to jump in. So you've got your mic somewhere near something that I think is shuffling around. So try and keep that away from there if you don't mind. Yeah. And I did notice that number on your website. It's so big a number. I wasn't sure. I mean, 2.4 billion square feet. That's most of America, as far as I can tell. I might be wrong, but there's not much left after you've finished with it. Tell me first, what do you actually do to, because it's very interesting. I'm sure actually my clients as well as my listeners will be interested to know, what exactly do you do to, quote, enhance the tenant experience? And then let me ask you how you get that message out. But you can start by telling
All
me.
right, that's great. So we believe that the best tenant experience stems from the best building experience, right? And so to run a building, to operate a building in the best possible way gives you the best confidence, the best chance of providing the best tenant experience. So that's what Building Engines enables our customers to do. We enable them to provide the best building experience for their tenants. And so that has all kinds of great impacts. So the tenant is happy, they've got clear visibility into the things that they care about, amenities or progress of requests, those kinds of things. And it also then will keep happy tenants in the building, right? So you want to keep those folks where they are and minimize any kind of tenant churn. And so having a fully occupied building is the end goal for the building owner, right?
Exactly. All right. So now I asked you a specific question. The only thing that I can think of that would enhance tenants' experience perfectly would be to dramatically reduce rents. But I know that's not what you're talking about. So how exactly do you enhance the tenant experience? What does that actually mean?
Yeah, you bet. So, little things matter, Adam, right? So, when you're a tenant in a fancy office building, you want, all the things to work properly, right? So if you have an issue like a light bulb just went out over my head, right? I want that fixed quickly. You want to make sure that, air conditioning is on after hours, or if you're working late, if you have people on your team that are working late, and you want to know, how much are you spending on all these things, right? So bringing all that visibility and quick action to the things that matter most, those little details, is really what we're all about. So whether it's having a visitor register at the front security desk in the building lobby and seamlessly get up into your office space on the 32nd floor where I am, having that visitor experience be really easy and simple, that matters. Having all of your work order requests, like, would you please change the light bulb? The pipe in the bathroom is leaking. These kinds of things. Having all those kinds of requests be acted on quickly and understanding what's the status of those work order requests. So those are things that we enable as well. We also enable building managers, property managers, or building owners to communicate with all of their tenants in a very seamless way. So, hey, the parking lot is going to be paved next Thursday. Please park across the street, not in the back of the building. Having that kind of broadcast communication is another service that our platform provides. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So is it a communication system or a tech solution? Like if a bulb goes out, does a diode go off somewhere that says bulb on the 32nd floor has gone out? Or is it a tech solution? Sorry, I'm looking as I heard a ping and I wasn't sure. It might be me, so I'm going to turn that off over there. All right. So
So we sell a software platform that has lots of different modules. And so, customers can buy the modules that they think are right for them. So if they're interested in submitting work orders, then, the person who manages a building would have this work order system in place, and that would be the module name. If the property manager is also interested in what are all the preventative maintenance tasks that I need to take care of in this building? Well, we have a module for preventive maintenance, and that enables the property manager to keep track of all the different tasks that they need to do. For example, before the summer, kicks into full gear, make sure you're changing those filters in your air conditioners, right? Like we all try to do at home. Take care of things before they break. So we've got a whole lot of capability just around preventive maintenance as well. And so we have a number of different modules that enable building operators to run their building in the best possible way so that their tenants really enjoy the experience of being a tenant in that building.
So now give me a kind of paint a picture of, with 2.4 gazillion square feet being managed. I'm not sure if I could ask you for such a thing, but like a typical client of Building Engines, what would they look like?
Yeah, so they're probably a Class A building, right? So they might have a great office tower in Manhattan. It might be a 800 100,000 square foot building or something like that. It might be managed by a professional third party. There's a bunch of them out there. I'm not going to name any one in particular, but a really high quality third party manager. And so those people, have a budget to work under. They need to manage this property in budget while providing the best possible tenant experience. They need to report out to the building owner ultimately that, hey, we were in budget and we provided such a great experience that all the tenants are renewing their leases with us, right? Those kinds of things. We also provide other services so that, as buildings change hands or as tenants move in and out, sometimes you want to reconfigure the office space, and you want to make sure that as a building owner, you want to make sure that you're renting every available square foot in your building. So sometimes as offices get reconfigured, it's helpful to remeasure those office spaces, so you're making sure that you're putting out on the market every single rentable square foot that you could possibly offer to a prospective tenant.
All right. Now, so I was originally contacted by Liam there at V2 Comms to speak to Tim Curran, who I think is your CEO, but I was upgraded. I'm glad to say to talk to you because you are the CMO, Chief Marketing Officer, which is all I want to talk about. So let me ask some questions about how you get out there. So now what you've described to me sounds like you have two different audiences, and it's how you communicate with them.
Yes.
To sell your products that I'm really interested in.
Okay.
So the two audiences, it struck me as being either the owners of these buildings or the people that manage their buildings. So which is it? And what is your first point of contact with them in terms of marketing? How do you get your message out?
Yeah, so we really look at it holistically, and we look at it as like a property management team. And in some buildings, the owner is also the manager. Right, so it's not a binary situation, yeah. And some buildings will have third parties managers, and some buildings won't. So there's all different types of configurations here. So we look at a property management team, and we recognize there could be tenant coordinators, there's engineers, there's lead engineers, there's property managers, there's third party managers, there's building owners, all those kinds of things. So that's kind of the list of personas, I guess, if we're going to jump into marketing speak. Those would be the potential buyer personas, and that we're looking to get our message across to.
Okay, so good. So now we are getting into marketing speak, which is exactly where I want to be. So you've described some personas. I sometimes call those avatars. So what? How do you now reach out to those folk? Are you doing it through PR? Are you doing it via website? Are you creating funnels? Are you advertising? Tell me what you're doing to find these. For the two guys that have not heard of you before, by the way, with 28 billion square feet.
Yes, right.
Both of them are listening today, so I want a piece of the action when they call you.
You bet. So, we would use all the traditional marketing channels that you might expect, but, we're sensitive to, we do a lot of research on our target audiences. So we know, for example, that, our avatars in your lingo, which I like, and I might co-opt if you don't mind.
No, I want a byline though.
Put a citation in there.
Exactly.
Fair enough. So, we recognize that they're not spending a lot of time on social media, right? So they're not spending oodles amount of time on Facebook, for example, and expecting to find information about their building operations software provider. So I'm not spending a lot of money on paid ads in Facebook, for example. So, we are trying to reach our customers or prospective customers, if you will, through multiple channels, right? So there is some element of social, because we know at the end of the day, everybody is on LinkedIn, for example, right? So that's naturally, there's going to be a small percentage of our target audience that's on Twitter, but it's a very small sliver, but that's another forum that has my eye. We recognize that a lot of people communicate these days through email. Email would be another channel that we go after. We also spend a significant percentage of our program budget on all things, digital. So these ads is a major thing. Website traffic. We have a tremendous percentage of organic website traffic. I think we have a lot of brand equity, if you will. We've been in this space, leader in this market for quite some time. We have, I think, a good brand around being an innovator in the space and providing modern solutions for our customers. So, we have a lot of people who know who Building Engines is, and they'll come, oftentimes direct traffic right to our site.
That's interesting. All right, so good. Now you've triggered like a whole page of questions for me.
All
So
right,
I'm definitely I'm on good, comfortable ground now. Hold on, I'm just typing out. Every time I type, it's not that I'm sending a message to anyone. I'm just reminding myself that I want to ask questions. All right, so let's start with LinkedIn because that's fascinating. What we're actually finding is that, and I raise money for real estate developers, or at least help them to raise capital, including high-rise office building owners, in fact, to raise capital to acquire deals. And we do extensive marketing. And what I've noticed actually is that a lot of site traffic is coming from LinkedIn. So I'd actually quite like to explore that with you. It's something that we're looking at more closely. So in what way do you use LinkedIn? Do you do any advertising on LinkedIn? Do you do some targeted messaging? I mean, how do you actually use that channel?
What's really interesting, Adam, that I find about LinkedIn and commercial real estate is, at the end of the day, this industry in particular is all about relationships, more so than other industries that I've been exposed to. So I might be a property manager in this building, and today this building might be owned by you, but buildings are bought and sold all the time. So I might be working for a different owner tomorrow than I am today. So what winds up happening is it really becomes a network or a community of relationships where one property manager knows and trusts the property manager in the building next door, and in other buildings in their portfolio. So and it's very similar. I think that's why LinkedIn in particular is the social platform of choice, because LinkedIn is, at the end of the day, all about relationships as well. I'll buy a building operations platform if my buddy at the next building speaks highly of it, and he's had a good experience with it. So you swap sort of like vendors, right? So I think that's at the nut of why LinkedIn is so interesting. So we are doing things, and we're just starting in some of these areas, but we are doing paid ads on social for LinkedIn, for example. We'll do naturally we have a handle, a company handle that we'll put out basic posts on, and different people will in the company will reach forward those posts. So that other, in hopes of getting more engagement and spreading our word to the various networks that we each have. Personally.
Okay, so let me jump in then. So this is what we do, right? So of course I have to pitch a little bit to anybody listening, is we create massive amounts of educational content.
Okay.
Because to kind of randomly, well, I don't mean to suggest that anything you do is random, but to put some posts out from somebody inside the company. Requires some effort on their side, and you're busy people. So what we do is we create enormous amounts of educational content that is split up into all different kinds of medium, from articles to video to what I call notable quotables, etc. And then we run that on a kind of constant basis on LinkedIn, and we're finding that that's driving traffic. Do you have any kind of formal educational content that isn't sales related, that really is just highly useful, valuable information that your potential customers consume?
There's always room for more. So we do have some. We have a head of research here, and they'll go out and do research and publish reports on tenant satisfaction best practices or those kinds of things. So data intensive. We have so many customers, right? We've got 800 customers. So we've got a really good corpus of portfolios and buildings and property managers where we can harness that information and really do a lot of research across our customer base to understand what's working best in different cities or different building types or different sectors of commercial real estate. And so we harness that information from across our customer base to figure out like, hey, these are the best practices for a Class A, office, or this is what's working today in, retail, those kinds of things. So we do publish that type of educational content, if you will, to help, our customers learn from their peers in the market where they might not have that personal direct relationship or contact. But, providing more of that type of information through these different channels, like you've mentioned, I think is always appealing, because you can never have too much out there to help educate, potential customer.
You really can't. I mean, it's content marketing, right? It's basically just creating a flood of content to drive traffic. So that's interesting. So you create these thought leadership or white papers, these reports. Do you find, how do you use then those? Do you find that works? I mean, obviously, like you said, look, we all want to do more, right? This is what we got going. But do you find is that effective for you? You finding that useful? Or do you capture names when they land on the website and then communicate? Like, how do you use that stuff?
Yeah, that's a great question. I love to talk about these things. So, what other, cynically, what other people call research, right? You might call marketing, right? But, we're not really putting out promotional messages through these types of research reports. These are really fact-based, from across our customer base. So we'll encourage people to download the report, and we might capture, yes, their basic contact information, and that would go into a scoring system and that kind of traditional marketing thing, right? In some cases, that it's not always the case. In other cases, we'll say, we might take a slice of the report and say, hey, this is really interesting to this, segment of our database. We're going to push it out to them, and it's not gated. It's a free asset. We just want them to know, and because we want them to know, we think this would be of particular value to them. And we would then promote that through various channels, right? Social, for example, or email. We'll even run, webinars on some of these things where people can find out what are the best practices. And in that situation, that there would be a registration form.
How do you like doing webinars?
It's really interesting. They've been really powerful for us. We've got a lot of interesting developments on our product side, and I find a surprising amount of activity. People are tuning in. They're really like the conversion rate, like the registration to people who actually attend is quite high. And then I find not only do they attend, but we track how many people attend at the beginning and how many are there at the middle, and then how many are there when questions are asked. And it's a flat line. Like they join and they stay the whole time. And the questions we're getting at the end, like there's a high volume of questions that we're getting at the end of these webinars. So we're going to continue to do more, and we're going to continue to try to specialize the webinars so that they target individual segments of the database, because we want to provide the most relevant information. It's not about, getting, I'm very happy to provide a very substantive webinar to a very small group of people, as long as it's valuable. I'm not interested in like the volume. I'm interested in the quality.
That's very interesting. So how do you decide give me an example of the kinds of webinars that you do?
Yeah, you bet. So we just ran one recently. So we talk about, our ability to, for example, there's a lot of compliance requirements in New York City in the wake of September 11th around how buildings are documented, right? What's the floor plan look like? Where's the emergency access, right? So like where are the stairwell on a floor plan? Where are the stairwells? Where are the sprinklers? Those kinds of things. And those plans need to be documented in a certain way and then filed with the building department of New York City on an annual basis, so that if there should be some kind of a problem in the building at some point in time, the fire department would have very quick access to the latest floor plans, and they would know exactly how to enter the building and get to the appropriate floor. Right?
That's really, so this is highly educational then. This is almost, it's training basically, right?
Yeah, a lot of people don't know, depends how long they've been in this industry, but they might not know that's a requirement that you have to do on an annual basis. So we might have a webinar that sort of explains what that's all about and why that happens. We might also have, more product-focused webinars that says, hey, did you know that you can, look at all your work orders on a visual representation of your building, And if you know that there's a complaint in your building on the 3rd floor, the 5th floor, and the 6th floor, and it's a 6-story building, there's water damage by the window in all of the floors on the east side. Well, guess what? Sometimes it's helpful to see that on a visual representation of your building, because the problem might actually be on the roof, and there's a leaky pipe that's coming all the way down the side of the building and getting into the faulty seals along those windows. So you actually don't want to just repair the windows. You want to replace the pipe on the roof as well.
Yeah.
So having that ability and showcasing the value of that and quantifying that is a little bit more product focused, but that would be a different type of webinar that we might run.
That's really interesting. All right, so let's stick with webinars just for a little bit longer. We can certainly tree out from there. So how did you decide to do webinars? They're certainly very, very impactful in capital formation as well. There's no doubt about that. So what was how did that come about? And do you only do live webinars as well?
We do both. We do live and recorded. For sure. We'll always do live Q&A, even if we do a recorded webinar. So that's, I think, normal practice. What really we find is that it's by listening to the signals that we're getting at different parts of the building. So the types of conversations let me shut off Slack. The types of conversations that we're getting from our SDR team, for example. People are maybe asking questions. They want to know how things work a little bit earlier in the selling process. So we know, okay, they want to engage with us and they want to understand the product a little bit earlier. So in many situations, it's a highly educated buyer, right? So by the time they interact with us, they just want to, they don't want to know the value prop. They know the value prop. They know building engines. They want to see, how does this thing work? So they want to understand sort of the mechanics of it in detail a little bit more. So that we got enough of these signals that we were like, hey, we should put more sort of mid-funnel or bottom of funnel types of activities. Let's increase our volume of that, because there seems to be an appetite for people to get under the covers. So oftentimes in the funnel, right, you're going to put out a broad message at the top, talk about your value proposition and explain what you do and why you do it and what the value of that is. But as you move down or through the buyer's journey, an educated or an interested buyer is going to say, okay, I understand the value proposition. Now tell me how you drive that kind of value. And that's really where you want to have a little bit more interactive session, where you're explaining concepts or showing product features. And so we have a lot of activity at that stage of the funnel. So we felt we should increase the volume of marketing programs at that particular stage.
That's interesting. Yeah. So one of my clients reported recently, because for us, it's really tough actually to connect the dots between top of funnel, first contact with a prospect, yes, and that $100,000 check. It's not widgets, right? Yeah. It's you can't track it digitally all the way through the cycle. But what he said was that his experience is that since we started building these systems, that it's first contact with prospects, they are far further advanced, to quote him, in the sales process. Mm-hmm. In other words, when they actually make contact with you, when you have that contact with them, they already know what you do, how you do it. And it's for the salespeople just to carry them over the finish line. Is that something that you experience as a result of your marketing as well?
I'd like to think that it's only because of marketing.
You and I are on the same page. Exactly. That's what I'm trying to tell everybody. Good.
It's all about the marketing people, right?
Wasn't for us, you wouldn't exist.
No, but to be fair, I mean, it is absolutely true that, we have a very educated buyer. They know sort of their business and they know the solutions that are out on the market, and they want to understand things in detail very quickly. And, what we find is and I'm going back to your webcast question. A lot of people in this market can, talk to us a lot about how inefficient and painful it is to do RFPs, right? Request for price, right? It's a lot of manual work. It's a lot of emails involved, a lot of phone calls, basically begging contractors to bid on their project, right? And so a lot of time is wasted. So we heard enough of that we've actually, acquired a company that specializes only in RFPs for commercial real estate. And so we have a module in our platform that's focused just on the RFP process. We use artificial intelligence to streamline it. And so now people can very quickly get from, hey, I've got a project that I want to stand up and get some RFPs out there, to actually contracting with an appropriate provider and getting the project done even quicker. So it's those kinds of conversations that we have as a result sometimes of webcasts where we understand better, hey, these are the questions people are asking because they have pain around this particular process or workflow or whatever it is, right? So we're constantly trying to evolve our platform based on signals like this. And sometimes there are simple questions on a webcast where it's like, hey, do you have anything for how I can streamline the RFP process? And if you hear that enough, you're going to realize like, oh, wow, this is something that everybody has. So we'll go to our customer advisory board and we'll be like, hey, you're all industry experts. You manage large portfolios. Should we have a solution for streamlining the RFP process? And and that's exactly sort of like the process we followed when we acquired this company, and we now have an RFP solution.
That's fascinating. So you guys are ginormous. If you've got a customer advisory board, is that what you said? Yes. Something like that? Okay, so that is beyond the scope of anything that we touch, because we're just small developers raising a few $100 million once in a while. So we don't have that kind of scope. But
your efficiency sounds astounding.
But so a few things that's very interesting. Yes. So what I wanted to say was that the way we tap into that, actually, and it's fascinating that you're getting it from webcasts, is to actually send out questionnaires.
Yes.
Occasionally. So we'll be very, very focused. We'll send out a questionnaire. And what we find is a couple of things. First of all, we're looking for investors. So those that respond are very high, target prospects for a start. But they also tell us what they want to know, what their pain points are, exactly the way that you described it, so that we can create content for them on the principle that if they want to know, probably everybody else does as well. So it's a great way of getting that kind of intel. The question I was going to ask you was, you've mentioned this a few times, this concept of actually the terms that you've used, the scoring system, and also segmentation. So it sounds like you have a very sophisticated approach to that with your email list, your customer base. Can you talk a little about how you do that, or actually how you create those segments and how you then use them?
Absolutely. So, in our database, we have existing customers and we have prospective customers. And, we as you would, segment them based on a variety of factors. Some of those factors might be job title, for example, or geography, right? It might be the account that they're associated with, those kinds of things. We might grade them into levels of seniority, right? This is an executive versus this is someone more junior. And buying authority equates to each of those titles, right? So there's a segmentation layer here for sure. We're always trying to provide the highest value to the appropriate person at the appropriate stage of their journey, right? Like that's what marketing people do, right? And you want to engage people with messages that they find relevant and useful in their daily lives. So, we look at, buying signals, and we try to, like you would in any kind of scoring system, we look at demographic information. Does this fit our customer profile? And is this a behavioral aspect? So what are people engaging with? Is it an infographic? Or is it a research report that we've put out there? If they're engaging in it with an infographic, we know they might be earlier on in their buying cycle and they're just trying to sort of educate themselves on the most basic aspects of, the particular solution. If they're reading a full-fledged research report that they've downloaded from our site, we know they might really want information and they might be open to some kind of a conversation. And so we would assign them different levels of points in the system.
Lou, do you auto respond to people that download? So, for example, somebody downloads a document, that they've watched it, or they watch a webinar, that they've gone all the way through to the end, right? They stuck around for the Q&A. Will you have people manually follow up with them, or will you automate some of those responses to tickle prospects along a little bit further?
It's a combination. So we have nurture streams built out where we believe that here's a cohort that finds this type of information interesting. And that cohort could be comprised of people in different types of buildings, but all in the same geography, for example, or whatever, right? So we would have nurture stream strip campaigns where we would serve up information of a particular type to a particular segment of our database because they've indicated through their past behaviors in the recent past that this kind of stuff is interesting to them. We also will combine that with, people calling what we think would be, prospective customers that would find value in our kind of a solution. So we'll have both an automated and a manual approach towards these things. We find the combination works well, but it's not in a creepy kind of way. Like, you do have the ability to say, I know you're on my website right now. I like your shirt kind of thing. That's kind of creepy. We don't want to do that. What we're trying to do is really understand, like, what is this person ultimately looking for? What would be of most value to them? And how can we serve up that type of information? Is it a phone call, or is it just, give them the latest research report and let them contact us? So we're trying to be sensitive to where folks are in their stage.
Fascinating. All right. Quick question. I think, unfortunately, this is probably going to be a no, but I'm guessing wildly. Do you also cater to apartment owners?
No.
Okay, I thought so.
We don't do residential really as a core part of our business. So owners of large apartment buildings or condos or those.
You don't deal with that, but offices, retail. Did you say?
Retail, large retail, as well as large industrial sectors. There's a bunch of others as well that we do. We do stadiums, hospitals. But if I think of the largest chunks of our database, it probably fits into those. There's a bunch in facilities, large stadiums and whatnot, and hospitals. It's probably like those 5 or 6 segments of our database comprise most of our customers. There probably are a few residentials that have crept in there over time.
Nobody noticed.
Yes, right.
They pretended to be offices.
Yes, they were masquerading as large office towers in Manhattan. All
right. So I'll tell you, let's move towards wrapping up. It's fascinating talking to you. It's very interesting. You have a very interesting business there.
Thank you.
Let me ask you though. So you deal with the commercial real estate industry, and we were talking about segmentation. So what do you find is the hardest part specifically of marketing to the commercial real estate industry? What do you find is the toughest part? And do you do any, so I shouldn't double barrel these questions, but do you do any, in terms of segmentation, you're looking at it's office building owners, managers, etc. But do you also do tenant outreach? And Intel inside, right? Have you got building engines inside as a kind of brand or to help enhance the owner?
Yeah, exactly. We recognize that, buildings are brands, right? To their owners, they want their building to be seen as like a great place that you're going to have an awesome experience and you should sign a lease with us. So our platform does allow them the ability to brand the messages that they send out to their tenants, if that's of value to them. So hopefully that answers, that part of your question. If we, jump over to your other barrel there, the other question that you had.
Jump over another barrel. Sorry.
Yeah. So, the hardest part of marketing into commercial real estate, there's always finding who wants this kind of a message and serving up the right information at the right time. I don't think it's necessarily unique to commercial real estate. I think any good marketer is going to want to have good hygiene around what type of information you're providing to the different target audience. I find that's true in this industry as much as it's true in any other industry. So it's understanding the buying signals and putting them into the right bucket of the funnel.
So you don't find, just to kind of wrap up this question, but you don't find that commercial real estate sponsors are kind of set in their ways. We've been doing this for a long time. We don't need it. if I can't scratch a window with it, I don't trust it, kind of thing, right?
There are some who would say that, these folks are overwhelmed. There's a humongous amount of systems that they're already managing. They don't want to hear about one more, application or that kind of thing. What I find is that our type of platform is mission critical. So people are willing to engage when it comes to their platform for building operations, because they have one, and it could go across multiple, across their entire portfolio. So, we're probably the only platform out there that can be global. We can scale massively. We handle number of languages, currencies. So you could actually use our platform on literally a global basis and run your entire global platform on our platform. And there's really nobody else in the market that can do building operations platforms on a global basis. So when we go to market with messages like that, I think people understand how unique that is.
Fascinating. Lou, what a pleasure talking to you. So I'm going to sign off with 3 sign-off questions.
Yes, sir.
These are quick, rapid fire, short or as long as you want. Yes, I ask all my guests the same questions. So now my business, as you know, is raising money or building systems for sponsors to raise money online, right? Commercial real estate sponsors. Now, being a marketing expert, for somebody who is just starting off doing any kind of marketing online, what's the most important thing you would advise them to keep in mind if they're starting off with an online marketing program?
You're just starting off in online marketing. So, understanding your target audience, right? Where do they look for information? What types of channels, are they going? Is it LinkedIn or is it Facebook or whatnot, right? We're assuming in commercial real estate, it's probably not Facebook. So I think it's really understanding the behaviors and the profile of your target audience is probably, step number 1. And inside of that are, what are their pain points and what solutions do you have that can address those pain points? So I think being as succinct as possible, it's around that.
Second of my last 3 questions. Personally, and, doesn't look like you've been around that long.
Oh, I like you, Adam.
Only somebody as ancient as me would respond in that way. What's been the hardest lesson you've learned personally online?
Oh, yeah. It's not always easy. My goal is always track every click and track every dollar, right? And it's not as easy nowadays as it was before because there are so many different variables to look at digitally. But so I think the hardest lesson is making sense of all the data. And I think that's true at our customer level as well. There's just so much information being thrown at building owners or whatever. You got to be able to quickly sift through it in a meaningful way so you can hone in on the actionable insight. And I find that's the hardest thing when it comes to online marketing for me is there's just so much information. Being able to cut to the quick is the biggest challenge.
It is a challenge, isn't it? Yeah, I think that's the key word in that is actionable. Get what is really important to be doing.
What matters, yeah.
Right. Final question.
Yes, sir.
Your key daily habits, again, personally, what are your key daily habits that keep you successful online?
Keep me successful online. That's great. There's so many. I feel like it is just a universe, isn't it, online? There's just an endless amount of things to explore. I like to see what messages are being put out there in the marketplace. I was speaking to, a member of our customer advisory board today to hear what they're asking for as well. I think it's keeping abreast of what's the conversation online. And I think, social is a good forum for those kinds of things. Understanding what people are responding to, what kind of ads are being put up in the space, what are messages that other vendors in the market are putting out there. What I think that's kind of interesting. So those are things that I will look at on a regular basis.
Lou, before I say thank you, I'm going to shout out to Liam, who has been sitting on a QT listening into this whole thing. I want to thank him and V2 Comms for putting us together. Yes. Lou Jordano, Building Engines CMO. Thank you very, very much indeed for your time with me today.
Thank you, Adam. My pleasure. Great to talk with you.
Fascinating, right? What a super nice fellow. That was Lou Jordano, who is Chief Marketing Officer at Building Engines. To find out more about Lou and his company, go to the podcast page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com, where you can also access the free whiteboard workshop, where I show you how to build the best digital marketing systems in the industry to raise capital for your deals. That is all on the podcast page for today's episode at gowercrowd.com. All right, that's it. Thanks for listening, and thank you, Lou Jordano, CMO at Building Engines, for your time today with me. That's all for this episode. I'll see you next time, and for now, this is Dr. Adam Gower signing off.